The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of the luxurious mansion, casting soft golden streaks across the polished wooden floor. Eleanor Parker slowly opened her eyes, feeling the heavy silence that filled the vast bedroom. She turned to her side, where her husband, Damien Parker, a powerful billionaire in the business world, was still fast asleep. There was a time when every morning began with his gentle kisses. Damien would run his fingers through her hair, whispering sweet words before getting out of bed. But now, those moments felt like distant echoes of a past she could barely touch. She gazed at his face, searching for traces of the man she had once loved so deeply. Yet all she could see was the invisible chasm that had grown between them. Carefully, Eleanor slid out of bed, making sure not to wake him. As she walked past the grand mirror in their bedroom, she paused for a moment. The reflection staring back at her was of a woman with long, silky hair, now streaked with a few strands of silver. Her delicate features remained unchanged, but there was something in her eyes that made her feel strangely lost. She sighed, reaching for the silk robe draped over a chair, before quietly stepping out of the room to start another day, one that felt just like all the others. Descending into the kitchen, Eleanor started preparing breakfast in the vast yet hollow space. The sleek, high-end appliances gleamed under the morning light, but despite the luxury, there was an undeniable absence of warmth. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the grand staircase. Moments later, Isabel and Ethan rushed into the kitchen, their laughter filling the air. "Good morning, Mom," they chimed in unison, their eyes sparkling with energy. Eleanor smiled as she poured milk into their glasses. "Did you two sleep well?" "Yes, I dreamed I was flying like a superhero," Ethan exclaimed, his voice brimming with excitement. Isabel giggled, playfully arguing that he was just imagining things. Eleanor listened attentively, nodding and asking questions, cherishing these small moments of joy. The dining room door opened. Damien stepped in, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, exuding the effortless authority of a billionaire. He took his seat, immediately unlocking his phone and scrolling through emails as Eleanor placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. "Thanks," he muttered, his voice deep but distant, his eyes never leaving the screen. Eleanor pressed her lips together. There was a time when he would pull her close, kiss her forehead, and whisper a playful remark. But those days felt like another lifetime. The children continued chatting enthusiastically about school and their weekend plans. Damien nodded occasionally, but never fully engaged in the conversation. As breakfast wrapped up, he stood, pressed a quick kiss to each child's forehead, and walked out, without another word to Eleanor. She watched his figure disappear beyond the grand entrance, a familiar emptiness settling deep within her chest. After dropping the kids off at school, Eleanor drove back to the grand mansion that once symbolized everything she had ever dreamed of. Now it felt more like an empty shell, beautiful yet lifeless. She went through the motions of tidying up, straightening the pillows in the living room, adjusting the fresh flowers on the marble countertop, but her mind was elsewhere. The luxury surrounding her, the crystal chandeliers, the imported silk sofas, the million-dollar paintings, shimmered in the morning light, yet none of it could fill the hollow space inside her heart. As she stepped into Damien's study, her eyes landed on a framed photo tucked away on a bookshelf. It was their wedding picture, capturing the moment they had vowed to love each other forever. Eleanor picked it up, her fingers tracing over their beaming faces. Back then, Damien wasn't a billionaire, just an ambitious young man who had looked at her like she was his entire world. Now, he had everything he had ever wanted: wealth, power, success. Yet, somewhere along the way, they had lost something far more precious. Setting the frame back in its place, Eleanor felt a weight settle in her chest. She wondered, does he still love me, or am I just another piece of the perfect life he's built? She sighed, turning away. Outside, the sun continued to shine brightly, but within her, a quiet storm was beginning to brew. On Saturday morning, the golden sunlight stretched across the vast Parker estate. Isabel and Ethan ran around the garden, their laughter filling the crisp morning air. Meanwhile, Damien, as usual, was in the garage, fully engrossed in working on his prized sports car. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, quietly clearing the breakfast table. The familiar sounds surrounded her, yet all she felt was emptiness. She glanced out the window. Her children were happy, Damien was occupied with his passion, but where did that leave her? Suddenly, a suffocating feeling washed over her. It was as if the walls of this grand mansion were closing in, trapping her in a life that felt more like a routine than a reality. She looked around, the sparkling chandeliers, the spotless marble floors, the perfectly arranged furniture. Everything was in its place, yet she felt completely out of place. A lump formed in her throat. She needed air. She needed to escape, even if just for a little while. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor grabbed her car keys and walked out. She drove aimlessly, without a destination in mind. She just needed to escape, to breathe, to feel something other than the weight of an existence that no longer felt like her own. When she finally stopped, she found herself standing before a familiar sight, a secluded beach just outside the city. It was here, years ago, that Damien had proposed to her. The salty breeze tousled her hair as memories flooded back. She remembered their long walks along the shore, their whispered dreams about the future. She remembered the way Damien had looked at her the night he got down on one knee, promising her a lifetime of love under the starlit sky. Eleanor sat on a nearby rock, watching the waves roll in and out, steady and unchanging. When did we become strangers? She wondered. She had everything, a family, a secure life, a home that others envied. But was she truly happy? Closing her eyes, she let the wind carry away her tangled thoughts. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. She couldn't keep living like this forever. Eleanor returned home under the quiet cover of night. The grand mansion stood illuminated, its golden lights glowing warmly against the dark sky. Yet, to her, it had never felt emptier. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she stepped inside. Sitting on the sofa, Damien immediately looked up, his fingers intertwined, his expression unreadable. But there was something unfamiliar in his eyes. Not the usual composure, not the distant coldness she had grown used to, but something raw, something vulnerable. Isabel and Ethan were playing on the rug nearby, but as soon as they saw their mother, they rushed toward her, wrapping their small arms around her. "Where did you go, Mom? Dad was really worried," Isabel whispered, her voice a mix of concern and reproach. Eleanor knelt down, holding them close. She kissed their foreheads gently, but her gaze remained locked on Damien. He said nothing. He just sat there, watching her, as if searching for something in her eyes that he wasn't sure he would find. A thick silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Dinner was unusually quiet. Eleanor barely touched her food, while Damien stole glances at her every few moments. He seemed to want to say something, but each time he hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. As they were finishing the meal, he suddenly placed his napkin down on the table. Sitting up straight, he looked directly into Eleanor's eyes. "You know, everyone at work envies me." Eleanor's brow furrowed slightly, surprised by his sudden remark. Isabel and Ethan also stopped talking, their curiosity piqued. "Not because of my career, my wealth, or my cars," Damien continued, his voice low, steady, and laced with emotion. "They envy me because I have you. Someone who is always there, waiting for me at home." Eleanor's heart clenched. She opened her mouth to say something, but Damien gently raised a hand, signaling her to let him finish. "I never really thought about it this way, not until today, when you weren't here." He exhaled deeply. "When I came home, this place was empty. Without you, without your presence, without your voice, I realized something. Everything I've built, my success, my money, my empire, none of it means anything if I don't have you beside me." Eleanor felt her chest tighten, a lump forming in her throat. "I've been so consumed by work, by my ambitions, that I lost sight of what truly matters." Damien's voice softened, yet it carried a weight that pressed deep into Eleanor's soul. "I forgot that happiness isn't just about building an empire. It's about cherishing what I already have." Isabel blinked in confusion. "What do you mean, Dad?" Damien looked at his daughter, then back at Eleanor. His gaze was filled with remorse, with longing, with the unspoken words of a man who had taken too long to realize his mistakes. Because sometimes we forget to say the most important things. We assume they will always be there, until we realize one day they might not be. Eleanor felt something warm trickle down her cheek before she even realized she was crying. She had waited so long for this, for a sign that Damien still saw her, still loved her, that she wasn't just another piece of his perfect life, but the heart of it. Ethan tugged at her sleeve hesitantly. "Mom? Dad? Are you getting a divorce?" For the first time in what felt like forever, Eleanor and Damien laughed together. "No, sweetheart," Eleanor reassured him softly, her voice steadier than before. Under the table, Damien reached for her hand. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it meant everything. Eleanor hesitated, then slowly intertwined her fingers with his. It was the first time in years that they had held hands like this. And for the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt something stir deep within her. Hope. After dinner, Damien and Eleanor tucked the children into bed together. It was the first time in years that they had done this as a pair. Isabel jumped onto her bed, giggling as she pulled the blanket over herself. Ethan, as usual, insisted on hearing a bedtime story. Eleanor was about to speak when Damien quietly sat down beside their son, his voice softer than she had heard in years. "How about I tell the story tonight?" Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You never tell us bedtime stories, Dad?" Damien chuckled, a genuine warm sound that Eleanor had almost forgotten. "Then tonight, I'll start." He began weaving a tale about an explorer searching for a hidden treasure, only to realize in the end that the greatest treasure of all was his family and those who loved him. Isabel and Ethan listened with fascination, occasionally interrupting with excited questions. Eleanor sat at the edge of the bed, watching her husband. She saw the way he leaned in when Ethan yawned, how he gently ran his fingers through his son's hair. And in that moment, she understood Damien wasn't just saying words at dinner. He was trying. Once the children had fallen asleep, Damien and Eleanor stepped into the hallway. They stood there for a moment, bathed in the soft glow of the nightlights, just a few feet apart. Damien was the first to move. Slowly, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was simply a deep, quiet embrace, as if he was afraid that if he let go, she would disappear. "I'm sorry," Damien murmured. "I'm sorry for letting life pull me so far away, for making you feel alone in a home that was supposed to be ours." Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his body, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "I never stopped loving you, Eleanor, but somewhere along the way I forgot how to show it. I forgot that love isn't just about promises we made in the past. It's about what we do every single day to keep it alive." A single tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek, but this time it wasn't out of sadness. She pulled back slightly to look at him. "I'm sorry too, for staying silent for so long, for assuming you didn't care anymore instead of telling you how I felt." Damien shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "Never, Eleanor. Never once have I stopped cherishing you. Marrying you was the best decision I've ever made." Eleanor let out a small laugh, tears shimmering under the hallway light. "Then prove it." Damien raised an eyebrow. "How?" "By never letting me feel alone again." Damien didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, lingering for just a moment. "I promise." And Eleanor believed him. In the days that followed, Eleanor noticed a quiet yet profound change in Damien. It wasn't in grand gestures or lavish gifts, but in the small, meaningful moments she had longed for. He started waking up earlier, no longer rushing out the door in the morning. He sat down at the breakfast table, genuinely listening to Isabel and Ethan's excited chatter, instead of merely nodding absent-mindedly. One afternoon, while tidying up the living room, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a message from Damien. "I just wanted to check in. How was your day? I miss you." She smiled softly, warmth blooming in her chest. It wasn't an extravagant apology, but it was proof that Damien was trying, and that was enough for her to start believing in him again. Dinner conversations became livelier. Damien made an effort to ask about her day, to laugh with the children, to be present. Eleanor felt them slowly reconnecting, piece by piece. A month later, on a Friday night, Damien asked her to dress up. "I have a surprise for you," he said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, curious, but followed his request. When she stepped out of the bedroom, he was waiting at the door, reaching for her hand. He led her to the backyard, where warm golden lights twinkled overhead. A soft blanket was spread out on the grass, a bottle of wine and a small selection of food arranged neatly. "A picnic under the stars," he murmured, "like we used to do when we were younger." Eleanor was momentarily speechless. She remembered those nights, back when love was simple, before money and responsibilities complicated everything. "Damien, you did all this?" "I wanted to remind you why you fell in love with me," he replied, guiding her to sit beside him. They sat close, sipping wine, reminiscing about the past. Damien recounted the first time he saw her in a small cafe. Eleanor laughed as she recalled the moment she accepted his proposal. They talked, they laughed, they remembered, rebuilding the bridge between them one shared memory at a time. And most importantly, they saw the future, one they were willing to fight for, together. Eleanor rested her head against Damien's shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you think love changes over time?" she whispered. Damien thought for a moment before gently squeezing her hand. "I think love has different phases," he said. "Sometimes it burns bright like fire, sometimes it's soft like the breeze, and sometimes it tests us. But what matters is that we never let go." Eleanor closed her eyes, smiling. "I think I'm falling in love with you all over again." Damien tightened his grip on her hand before pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for not giving up on me." That night, they sat together under the stars for hours, their love renewed, not through grand gestures but through